Hi guys, this is Mark Zickery. This is my YouTube channel called Mr. Politics that I started recently where I could talk about political issues. I'm very liberal and I've grown up liberal, and these are my opinions, just my opinions. No one has to have the same opinions I do, but I have another channel called Mr. Sci-Fi where I post about science fiction, all this stuff behind me, and on that channel I try to avoid speaking about political issues because science fiction is a big tent and everyone is welcome as long as they're not cruel, and try to come from compassion and empathy. But on Mr. Politics, I do take off that hat and put on another one, or no hat on at this point. Hey, this is how I cut my own hair. But I did want to do this commentary, and I'll be doing a handful of commentaries moving forward for whoever wants to listen to them. But this one is entitled "I Can't Breathe," and I think it's very amazing that there's so many different events occurring simultaneously. And let me just walk you through my day yesterday. Yesterday was a Saturday. I woke up. Elaine and I went to the park nearby where we exercise for 2 hours, three times a week. We wear gloves. I mean, completely covering our hands. We wear masks, and we avoid social contact. We keep social distancing. We have a trainer, but he keeps socially distant and wears a mask. And we lift weights and run and do all that stuff, and keeping healthy so that we can stay alive. But we're very aware that if we get in our age group, if we get coronavirus, we could possibly die. And one of the key factors of this disease, when you get it, if it's become serious, is you can't breathe. So I can't breathe is very much something someone with a bad case of coronavirus might say, and it might be the death of them as pneumonia sets in and so forth, and they're put on a ventilator, if there is even one available. So I can't breathe is very much part of the coronavirus. Now also, we went home and we watched the launch of the astronauts, the two astronauts aboard the Dragon, the SpaceX Dragon and Falcon 9, and that was an amazing event for both of us, for Elaine and myself, because we grew up with the space race. It was very personal to us, and to me particularly, being a science fiction person, and of course they're risking their lives. They could explode on the pad, they could die. There's a lot that could happen despite precautions, and of course when they get out in space, all they have to do is open the door, and I can't breathe would very much be what they would say, because there's a vacuum out there, and our planet is surrounded by a very, very thin membrane of atmosphere, and everything else beyond there, we can't breathe it. And so death is always very close at hand if you're not careful. So I can't breathe works as a statement for those guys, potentially, and hopefully they don't say that, because we want them to be hale and hearty and healthy, and we want to all get to Mars. Elon Musk, go Elon! But of course the key expression of that phrase, sadly, is what just happened with George Floyd, and all the enormous number of black men and women who've been murdered by police over the years and the decades and the centuries. And so I wanted to talk about that because Elaine and I also ended up yesterday at the protest at Pico in Fairfax, which is in our neighborhood, and there were police cars on fire. There were thousands of people with signs saying any number of things, including, of course, Black Lives Matter, and I can't breathe, and justice for George Floyd. So let me get into all of this, because people, I think, get the wrong message. And I think there's what I try and do in my work and in my life is boil everything down to the simplest components, to take complex things and make them as simple and clear as possible. And I read history and all the time. I'm reading H.G. Wells' Outline of History now. I just read recently the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William Shirer. Great books, both of them, and I've all the way back to Herodotus, an ancient historian, one of the first historians. So I'm very aware that none of this stuff is new. None of this stuff is new. I mean, when Spartacus rebelled against Rome and led thousands of slaves on simply a journey to try to get their freedom, the Roman army ultimately defeated them, and they crucified thousands of slaves, one per mile, along the Appian Way, leading all the way to Rome. So if you had been on the Appian Way, you would have seen, as far as the eye can see, men on crucifixes, on crosses, dying. And that was the exercise of power in the pursuit of injustice, greed, self-interest. And that's what we have now. We have now. Here's what's going on. And it's really simple. When people say, well, all lives matter, not just black lives, that's not the point. That's not the point. What they're saying is that my life matters. My life matters. If you just see out of other people's eyes, if you just have empathy, it's no one deserves. I mean, think about this. Let's put this in the context. This guy has a fake $20 bill. He goes to buy cigarettes. They call the cops, and he ends up murdered by the cops. Okay, no one stopped it. No one said, hey, wait a minute, this is not right. I mean, people were saying that, but no one took action because these men had guns, the police. And the police, the three other officers, didn't see fit to say to their compatriot who was acting out of insane overreaction, don't do that. And they were the ones who should have, more than anyone else. But what would have happened if I had taken a 20 and gone around the corner to Astro Burger and tried to buy a hamburger with it, okay, or in my case, a veggie burger? Would they have called the cops on me? Would I have ended up dead? No. What would have happened was they would have said, oh, this bill's fake. They would have run it and they said, this bill's fake. And I would have said, oh, well, I just got that out of the ATM and, you know, I'll go back to my bank with it. Here, take my credit card and run it up on my ATM card, you know, or here's another 20. And that would have been the end of it. I would have gotten my burger. I wouldn't have ended up dead, and I would have gone home. Why? Well, they know me, but also I'm white. Not really white, I'm Jewish, but, you know, I can pass as white. And, you know, I mean, previous generations, my family was exterminated by the Nazis, so it depends on who's the scapegoat at any given time. But right now, you know, I probably will not end my life being murdered by the police, okay? Black people can't say that. Black people can't say that. Anytime they're pulled over for like a busted taillight or anything. Well, you know, I feel very nervous around police, and I didn't know why. You know, it's like when I see police, I try not to make eye contact. I feel very uncomfortable. I didn't know why. And then some years ago, my dad and my brother Steve and I were having a meal, and I mentioned this, and my dad said, oh, well, that's because when you were little, I took you to the police station and had them lock you up in a cell to let you know what it would be like if you chose, you know, didn't stay on the straight and narrow. And so I had this traumatic memory that I no longer remembered, but I had the sense memory of it, of the fact that that at any moment I could be put in a cell, I could be arrested by the cops. And so cops are scary to me. Cops are scary to me. I don't see them as my pals, but they are. That's the thing. There are many great cops. There are many great people. When my car was stolen, my Toyota, the cops showed up. They by that night they'd caught the guy in my car, and I got my car back. Never thought that would happen. And they were kind, and good for them. Good for them. But there is a natural human reaction to injustice, to this isn't right. And if there is nothing you can do to stop it from continuing, you feel impotence, you feel rage, you feel that's humanity, that's natural, and it's right to feel that. Because if, like when my family was rounded up and put in a gas chamber and exterminated, that was injustice. There was nothing they could do about it. My grandfather left before that happened. He was going to be drafted by the Russian army, and everyone knew the Jews died in the Russian army. This is before the revolution, during the time of the Tsar. He joined the American forces fighting World War I, became a cook, and ultimately came to Chicago, brought my aunt and my grandmother over, and my mother was born in Chicago. If he had not done that, my grandfather, my grandmother, my aunt, and my mom would have all been exterminated. And so this is not a casual thing to me. Anyone who is facing injustice, this is power exercising and securing its own safety, exercising power in its own safety. The cops, the military, these are not people being sent out to do anything other than maintain power. And the people who are saying these other cops should be arrested, they're right. They're absolutely right. Any cop who kills an unarmed person should be put on trial. He should lose his job, unless there's incredible mitigating circumstances. But any time a cop kills someone who's in handcuffs, they should be tried for murder. It's that simple. It's that simple. and and children being put in cages, all of these things. I was put in a cage. I know how that felt, even though I don't remember it. It's left its ripple effect on me. So here's what I want to say to anyone who thinks those people are burning things. No one should break into a store. No one should rob it. But most of those people who are protesting aren't doing that. It's kids. Look at who's running off with tennis shoes. It's kids. It's kids. Kids do stupid things. There's a wonderful thing that Steven Spielberg did that I wanted to pass along. It was that when Schindler's List was shown in a multiplex when it first came out, a group of black teenagers were on a field trip for their school, and they were put in to watch that film with no preamble. And so they started laughing at it. They started making jokes, and it was a shame. And it was all across the headlines. Black kids have no empathy. They're laughing at the Holocaust. Blah blah blah. That wasn't the case at all. So Spielberg said, "Let me have a meeting with these kids." So he sat down with these kids, and he said to them, "Look, I was a teenager once too. I would go to movies and make, jokes and rude comments. That's what kids do. You guys, it's not racism. It's not anti-Semitism. You guys were dropped in with no preamble. Let me tell you about the Holocaust. And then let me find out from you what kind of movie you'd like to see." And they were astonished because they thought he was going to condemn them, this millionaire from Hollywood coming. And he was just a guy, understanding that they were just kids, And so they said, "Well, what we'd like to see is we'd like to see a movie about slavery. Why don't you make a movie about slavery?" So he made Amistad. And for me, that's what you should do when you encounter other people who are just people. We're all just people. And if you can come with compassion, if you can come with empathy, if you can come with patience, but most of all, if you can come with an understanding that if an injustice is done against anyone, it's an injustice against you. And what we need is to get rid of politicians who don't have empathy. I saw a photo of Mike Pence looking at these men in cages, who are these illegal aliens, and he could have been looking at a blank wall. There was nothing. And Trump is the same thing. He is a man incapable of empathy. And so whether you're a Trump supporter, whether you're a Pence supporter, irrelevant. Is cruelty the thing that's functioning in the land? Is cruelty, insensitivity? We can go on and on. But what we need to do is when there's an injustice, we need to speak out. We need to, and if others are speaking out, we need to say, I'm with you, And we need to change the laws, and we need to change the people making the laws. It's to have a trial with no evidence, no witnesses allowed, like the impeachment that Trump had recently, that's wrong. There's no other person in the world, other than some person who's a dictator, that would have that happen. These kids who are being arrested on the street, they're not going to have they'll have to take a plea or pay a fine or whatever, maybe go to jail, maybe go to prison. But, they need their day in court. They need fair justice, and fair justice starts at the top. And I'm sorry that Bernie dropped out of the race. Biden is, sort of daughtery grandpa guy, and I don't think he's actively evil, but I think he's not the right man in the right time at the right place. So in terms of solutions, and I think solutions are where everything starts, it can get better. Barack Obama did get elected. Kennedy was assassinated, but that brought about the voting rights bill, and Lyndon Johnson was wrong on Vietnam, but he was right on civil rights. And, Nixon got thrown out. He had to quit. Thank God. He was terrible. I remember him. Justice can prevail. Martin Luther King got murdered, but things got better. You have black people in all walks of life now. You have, Trump's brought back overt racism. It's allowed, it's made, the power elite has said, and I shouldn't use the word power elite. What I mean is, people are always being called to either rise to their best selves or their worst selves. And Martin Luther King was the right man in the right place at the right time. And even Malcolm X saw, before he died, when he went to Mecca, that people of all races and of all backgrounds could meet together and be treated as equals. And that's really all we're talking about. If you see someone getting a raw deal, if you see someone being, people are not being able to pay their rents now. People are not being able to buy food now. That's because the government is not acting fairly or competently. And I'm fine, I'm okay, but I recognize that many of my neighbors are not. There's a girl in the park that I was talking to who can't afford her rent, so she's bought a van and she's going to head up the coast and live in her van with her dog. Is that what should be happening in America? I mean, what about the people who can't afford a van? You know, it's not right. So we need people who care in power. We need people who don't look the other way. If you're kind, if you're compassionate, do it on a daily basis to people, talk to people, help people. You know, protect yourself, stay safe, but don't turn a blind eye to what's wrong. Don't turn a blind eye to what's unfair. The people in the streets are not wrong. They're burning buildings, but even the ones who are burning buildings, I mean, who knows why they're doing that? It gets attention, it gets coverage. They aren't outside agitators. It's nonsense. It's crap. You know, it's people not knowing how to get justice because they aren't getting justice. And the fact that I Can't Breathe is another, I mean, you know, I still remember the video of the guy who was just selling individual cigarettes and ended up dead, and he said, I can't breathe. Are these reasons to murder people? The guy goes for a jog, gets murdered, you know, and the people who do it are let off until it hits the internet. You know, it's all about just, you know, people. I mean, Jesus hung out with prostitutes. He hung out with lower class people. He wasn't hanging out with the rich guys, and there was a reason, because the rich can take care of themselves. They're fine. They're okay, you know, but the poor, the needy, the hungry, the sick, you know, that's us. The least of us must be cared to, must be treated with value. You know, my best conversations have been with people from every walk of life. I don't, you know, as I say, I don't need people to agree with me, but I do need people to act with compassion and put themselves out and make the effort. I don't think this government will solve the problem, but fortunately people grow old and die, and then you get newer people in with newer ideas. And you know, on my card it says Ocasio-Cortez 2024. You know, and again, if you're conservative, that doesn't mean that you can't act with compassion. If you love Trump, fine, love Trump, but don't view these people out in the streets as anything else than a hurting heart, because they know that their children, their loved ones, they themselves, any time of the day or night, could be killed by forces that should not be in that position, should not be allowed to do that. So speak up, be kind, be brave. You know, that's it. So that's all for now, but I just really wanted to say that. And it's a little bit rambling. I'm a little bit tired today, but there'll be more on these things. I'm going to be posting a few more of these Mr. Politics videos just to talk about this stuff. You know, I go out of my way to be kind in my life, in my work, in my world. And that's because I was raised by a compassionate person. And so I don't see other people as the enemy. And in Space Command, in my fictional TV show, I have a woman named Anoka Chandamal who's from Sri Lanka, and she's a peace activist. And her basic message is that we are all humanity. We are all one. And the motto of her, she says we cannot wait for our leaders to save us, to heal the world, to do the things that need to be done. And her motto is sanity at last. And I think that's what we all need to embrace, and not look to sanity from our leaders. If they're insane, they're insane, but we must not be insane. And sanity comes from your heart, from your head, from your hand, what you do, who you are, what you say, what you think. So that's about it for now. Thanks for being here, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Bye, guys.